Hey, pretty baby, you know I gotta tell you something. Come and see me, honey, I gotta tell you eye to eye. Oh, little darling, you know I really love you. Listen to me, honey, cause I'm speaking from the heart. Baby, please know I love you. Come on, girl, I really need you. Let me show you what I'm holding for. You make me a lucky guy. Hey, pretty baby, don't you know
Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars.
Into Bennington Unwrapped. I'm your host, Chris Bates, and of course, sitting alongside me, Stephanie Calabro. And boy, oh boy, do I love this show, Bennington Unwrapped.
Yeah,
it's the ticket.
We get to meet a lot of interesting people.
Right, and today, because it's election season, we have Meg Hansen coming into the studio today. So
thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. So, you know what? Why don't you kick this off by telling us who you are and why you're here in Vermont?
So I'm going to start from the very beginning.
Yes.
I was born in India. I left when I was 7 months. My family immigrated to a suburb of Dallas. It's a little bit of a tragic story. My mother was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and she was very ill. She was given 6 months to live. She ended up living for a few years in a very debilitated state. During that time, my maternal grandparents were the guardians of me and my sibling. And as you can imagine, that was a very formative experience, not only because of, having to confront a lot of loss, because she eventually lost the battle.
Right.
But my maternal grandparents, they were born in British India, because India was still colonized then. And so they always drew, especially my grandmother, always drew contrasts with what they had left behind and how blessed we are to be accepted here in America as American citizens. So that was a very, very formative experience in terms of understanding, this nation and its founding. When I graduated high school, I went abroad to study medicine. I got a British-style degree, which is the equivalent of a U.S. medical degree.
Oh,
and
nice.
But the reason why I did it was, I think the reason was wrong. I think I went and did that because I thought that I should fulfill my mother's life that was cut short. My mother and my father, very brilliant doctors. My mother especially was a researcher. But she was about my age. I'm in my mid-30s when her life was cut short.
I thought you were only like 18.
Well, that's a compliment.
It is.
I was like, wow, 18-year-old. Wow, running for office. That's awesome.
No, I'm in my mid-30s.
Okay.
So, that's not the right reason to go into something, right? Because, you have to fulfill your own strengths and your own passions.
Absolutely.
So it was a hard decision, and I don't think that my family could understand why I decided that even though I have the degree, I'm going to change my life. And I have always wanted to be involved and engaged with culture, with politics. So I moved to the Upper Valley 10 years ago to go to grad school at Dartmouth College. There I specialized in the Gilded Age, during the 1870s, 1900s, when the United States became the #1 superpower, overtaking Great Britain. So that was sort of my, I got a graduate degree in that. And during that time, the Upper Valley is part New Hampshire and part Vermont, right? So even though I was going to school in New Hampshire, in Hanover, I lived in Windsor.
Right.
And the drive through Windsor, I don't know if you've been there, but the drive through that is a drive through a town that has closed storefronts, a culture of despair and addiction. And on the horizon, you can see sort of the shadow of what was once a great industrial manufacturing hub. So that was my beginning, where I said I'm going to get involved because I want to understand what policies, especially Vermont policies, created this. And my understanding was that there's a very strong anti-economic growth philosophy driving the policies that come from Montpelier, and that in southern Vermont, as well as the Northeast Kingdom, the Vermonters feel unheard and unrepresented. So putting that together, I founded my own communications firm, and I've been involved in various initiatives, media initiatives, pro bono, volunteering. I also led a health policy think tank, because I still have the knowledge, and I might as well use it, right? So putting all these various things together, I just felt like in order to make a difference, I should step into the arena, put my name on the ballot, and run.
I think that's wonderful that you took that step, because that was my issue too, is I was like, we're not letting this happen. So I put my name on the ballot. And, I started more on I'm winging it, right? And the only thing that I had going for me was I knew quite a few politicians because of the show, and I had a lot of help and a lot of things along those lines. But, I was like, kind of like you, going, I want to make a difference. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's very important. And in Vermont, you're right, we have a lot of, what do I want to say, economic despair.
Yes.
It's throughout this entire state. Burlington, Brattleboro, Bennington, we're okay for the most part. But, so I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. But it's not the status quo. It's not. I hear a lot from people who are in office, and you served, so
Right.
Well, people just dismiss it and say it's just a rural problem. This is happening everywhere. But last year, I looked at the figures, and the 3 states that had the maximum inflow of new residents were Alaska, North Dakota, Idaho, Wyoming, these kinds of places that also have cold climates, and they also have small towns and very rural, right? So it's not about that. It's about the economy. In all these states, the economy is so much stronger and attracting and has jobs that are upwardly mobile. That's my whole thing. You need upwardly mobile jobs where you can create wealth and own property. Isn't that the main aspirations of the middle class?
Right, that is.
So, in Vermont, I'm sure, as you know, we have Act 250.
Yes.
Which seems to have been the thing that put the brakes on all our economic growth 50 years ago when they enacted that.
Yeah.
So, how would you propose to, for Vermont to be able to move forward when they have this kind of ball and chain that is holding them back?
And to make you understand this is that I eat, sleep, and drink Act 250 because it was in my committee. So I know the ins and outs and everything about it, and it is a ball and chain.
Right. So the number one thing would be deregulation, right? That's what we want to talk about.
Right.
We have the strictest regulatory burden. But, Act 250 gets a lot of attention, but there are so many local zoning ordinances, permitting processes that are all, they get triggered before you actually reach Act 250.
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly correct.
So now the reason is, and the way that I approach it is try to understand and explain to Vermonters what is the philosophy behind these ordinances. And that is that they see economic growth as something bad, economic development as equal to pollution and destroying the environment, when that's not true at all.
That's correct.
Because actually the more advanced that we get in terms of technology and scientific advances, the less pollution that we are able to do, right? We don't have, in Charles Dickens, right, in his novels, Victorian England, with all the coal and all
dirty.
That's not what we're doing now, not at all. And that's
Not at
because
all.
of scientific advancements. So we can have economic growth and development without having pollution.
Right.
So to make that synonymous, I think that's the problem, right? That's the problem. But then again, if your idea is, if the goal is to re-engineer Vermont into a 2-tier society, which is how I see it, the top tier is for tourists and a safe haven or a paradise for
Right.
second and third home owners,
Right.
and then a class of Vermonters who are trapped in perpetual government dependence. They can't even get out if they want to. If that's your goal, then Act 250 is great.
Right.
Because it drives out the middle class. The middle class,
That's true.
young people, we have aspirations. We want to, own a property, buy a house, have children, raise them. And those things are, they conflict with Act 250 and all these zoning ordinances that, prevent growth.
If you can get past Act 250,
Yeah.
then the A&R steps in. And then if you get past A&R, then Act 250 comes right back and bites you. So it's a double-edged sword. And when people say, oh, we need jobs and we need this and we need that. So, all right, you got to hold that thought, okay? All right, folks, we'll be right back with more Meg Hansen right after this. Welcome back to Bennington Unwrapped. I'm your host, Chris Bates, and of course, sitting alongside of me, Stephanie Calabro, Meg Hansen. Thank you so much. All right, Steph.
Well, we wanted to know, we got kind of sidetracked while you were telling your, kind of history of who you are and where you are. So why don't you continue with that, and then we'll get more into the meat of it.
Right. So as I was saying, the Windsor part, that's where I lived.
Yeah.
But 2 years ago, my husband and I, we moved to Manchester. And so, Bennington County, I'm a resident, and I'm running, it says Meg Hansen from Manchester. So that's definitely, although my heart is, in the Upper Valley, Manchester's my home, but I think of myself as a Southern Vermonter, and the issues that really affect Vermonters here, that's really close to my heart. One of that being, so many tens of thousands feel that they're not heard, that they're not represented, and that our needs and interests are not the number one priority in the Burlington, Montpelier, Chittenden-centric, politics of the state.
Okay, so you are running for lieutenant governor.
That's right.
And so why did you choose that particular office to run for?
So when I announced, Zuckerman, right now the incumbent, was still running, so it wasn't an open race that I just jumped in, because when he said that he was not going to seek a re-election, everybody jumped in. Because it's so the reason I'm saying that is I wasn't looking for a political opportunity. I got in because of the reasons that I said,
Right.
And I really believe that, and I said if it means challenging an incumbent, so be it, because these are very important, and the voices and concerns need to be heard. So the lieutenant governor's position is a statewide position, and these issues affect everybody, not just Windsor County or Bennington County. So that's why running for a statewide office is really important. But the lieutenant governor is the president of the state senate, so you preside over it. And in Vermont, we have 6 senators from one county. We have 14 counties, right? And this unequal representation, you don't see that anywhere in the nation. So I think that I felt that it was really important to bring balance and bring diversity and a different point of view to the Senate. Of course, my gender, my, ethnic background, that's one way of being diverse, but geographic diversity is also important. It's important to have voices from Southern Vermont, and also intellectual diversity in terms of my points of view. So, and the lieutenant governor gets to sit on the committee of committees. You get to decide, which, or at least have a voice in which Republicans go or which senators go to what committees. And I think you definitely need representation. We have 6 Republicans out of 30 in the Senate. So just as I said, balance, diversity, and being a part of that process is very important. And this is my goal, if I'm elected, to have the most expansive and most robust interactive constituent services program in the history of all lieutenant governors in Vermont. Why? Because we have an accountability and transparency crisis in our government, and it's really important for Vermonters to know what's happening. We don't get to know it, right?
So I got to step in here.
Yeah.
We have 2 things going against us.
Okay.
Right? One, you said most of our legislature is from up north, from Rutland on north.
Yes.
Then we have a problem of media. We don't have the media down here like we do up north. So in Montpelier, in my apartment, I would be able to watch, all the local news, which covered all the politics and everything going on up there.
Right.
Down south here, we don't have that. So we have to rely on Bennington Unwrapped with candidates like you that come in.
We have Cat TV, which is really great, but it's not the same as network
right.
So that is a huge problem.
News.
Yes. Yes.
That's a huge problem here. Because, if you want to know about Albany, New York, you just flip on the TV
we got
and
that.
we got that.
Right.
So you're right. That's a huge problem. So transparency, where do you draw the line at that? See, how do you get that down here other than on maybe a radio station?
Right. And so, but then, wouldn't you say that when you have something like VPR or Vermont PBS, which is to some extent funded by taxpayer money, don't you think that they have a responsibility to make sure that everybody understands and everybody's involved?
That's true.
So, this is up to the media. It's not that we don't have anything. We are in a first world country. This is America.
Right.
Right? So if you are being excluded, I would have to say that there's some deliberate thought to that, or just a neglect.
I think it would be more neglect because
Neglect.
all the stations.
Yeah.
I loved watching Fox News up there, the Fox local in
Yeah.
the morning.
Yeah.
They're not down here. You know, WCAX is only on from
Yes.
6 in the morning until 7
Yes.
or something,
Right.
and that's it. So that's not anything, and then it's all blacked out.
So, that's also tied to the fact that we have a demographic crisis and economic despair. If there were people here, if there was a market, people would come.
Right.
So it's all tied together. If we had a robust economy where people were coming, young people were coming, middle class families were coming, of course the media market would change. Right?
So the transparency thing is very important.
Right.
And then as far as for me as a legislator, I was about as transparent as you could get. I mean, I didn't hold back. I mean, choice words.
Not much of a politician.
Not much of a I was a Davy Crockett politician. That's what I will call myself, Davy Crockett. Because, I told people like it was. And
Yeah.
I had my go-rounds with David Zuckerman. I had my go-rounds with a lot of people up there.
So can I ask you a
Yeah.
question? Now, you are a Republican.
Yes. Yes.
And, there are like extreme, right?
Yes. Right. Right.
So where do you feel that you kind of stand in the spectrum of
Of the party.
Right.
of the party?
So I look at it as not defining myself in relation to others, but defining myself in relation to the philosophy. So what is known as classical liberalism and American conservatism, those are two intellectual schools of thought to which I subscribe. And the people, so I think Calvin Coolidge was, not just because he was a Vermonter, but I actually think that he was one of the best presidents that we had, followed by Ronald Reagan. And I know that's a cliche, but no, just in terms of being pragmatic and being, have empathy and caring about people. So that's where I would fit, in terms of historical models. I think that I don't know if they're the far right, but let's say reactionaries. I don't think they don't like me,
That's correct.
Right.
And
That's correct.
if you look at my Facebook, which we have a really active community, 2,500 followers, and I've been very open about it, and I don't want to paint anybody with a broad brush, but there are certain very known reactionaries who have told me things like, you're a foreign minority girl, you should go back to India, you're trying to jump in.
And that's so wrong.
But how? So then,
That is so wrong.
Right, or that you're jumping in from India into our lieutenant governor's seat. We're not going to let that happen. I'm a plant. So right, and so right now we are in a very tense environment nationally in terms of these things. So, but I want to be very, very clear that I'm not saying that everybody is at all, and I don't think that these people are in the right, because some people who say this to me identify as being far left, and some, of course, are reactionary. So it's not a political party thing, but just traditionally what you're saying, I don't think that spectrum wants me or likes me. However, there is also a faction of the Vermont Republican Party that feels that it's important to be as inoffensive as possible to the extreme left.
Right.
And to go along, to get along to go along, and to be very appeasing. And I'm not at all part of that either.
But, I find that, as I was growing up, I was a far right in my early career of my life.
Okay.
And I got up and I found that it didn't work for me. And so then I went to be a moderate.
Sorry.
I'm going to finish this when we come back. All right, folks, we need to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more Meg Hansen right after this.
Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars.
Back to Bennington Unwrapped. I'm your host, Chris Bates. Of course, sitting alongside of me, Stephanie Calabro, Meg Hansen, running for Lieutenant Governor on the Republican side. So, all right, Steph, you have a question.
So we've had lots of interesting conversations so far, and so down here in southern Vermont, as you alluded to, or actually said, that we are often feel neglected, and so the economic growth, which seems to be a big part of your your plan, and of course we desperately do need that down here in southern Vermont. And so what might be some of your ideas on how help southern Vermont.
That's a really excellent question, so thank you for that. Yes, the main problem that we have is that we're not able to grow economically, and deregulation would be the number one way to go, right, as we talked about. That's number one. Now, a study that was done last year rated all the states on where they stand in terms of economic freedom. Vermont was 43rd. But we're always competing with New Hampshire, right? Our so-called twin state.
Right.
Where did New Hampshire rank on that? Number 1.
Wow.
So that's, what we're seeing. And especially, as I said, I lived in the Upper Valley.
Right.
We're losing so much business when it goes to New Hampshire. And, that's not good. We're losing, we have a $400 million shortfall right now in our budget because of the whole COVID lockdown. So this is something that's always a big elephant in the room that we always have to deal with. So I would say number 1, deregulation. And number 2, I would say, I do believe comprehensive tax reform. I think that's the really, really important. And there are models that other states have followed where we can cut the tax rates and not worry about losing revenue. As we said, we've done that. So you can have revenue triggers. So when the revenue reaches a certain point, a predetermined target, then you cut the tax rate. So they're very responsible ways of doing that. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, the ways of doing that. That's one. And the third thing I would say is really, really important is to prioritize work and restore the value and importance of work in our society. And that doesn't just mean getting a 4-year liberal arts degree at Dartmouth College. That works for some people, it worked for me, but post-secondary and secondary level training in the trades and specialized skills, that's very important. And we have Vermont Technical College, but, showing our young people that, that there are different avenues to have access to different kinds of productive labor, that's really important, to combat also the culture of despair and addiction that really comes out of hopelessness, right? We don't know where we're going. I mean, what is there to do in Vermont? They're all really tied together. So I would say those are very important ways to go for it.
The one thing I found here in southern Vermont is that the population is only, I think, around 45 or 50,000 people from Rutland down south.
Yeah.
And we have an issue with businesses wanting to come to the southern part of the state because we don't have the workforce to even get started on it. And I didn't want to believe that. I was one of those guys, that's not true. And here I get up to Montpelier and they shove it right in my face and say, there you go, there's the truth. So how do you get some business to come here to say, let's take a chance. We don't have connectivity. We can't get the building permits because of Act 250. But yet the workforce isn't there. So how do you convince the constituents, don't worry, everything's going to be fine?
So let's give the example of Tesla or Amazon. They wanted a different headquarters, right? They were actively scouting. Now these companies are big, they're massive, and they have a brand name that everybody knows. So let's just wave a magic wand and say Tesla came to Bennington. So if they come, everybody knows them. Why wouldn't other people come? Why wouldn't they bring people themselves, their own employees? They would, right? So that takes care of the workforce development problem, right?
To get started.
And then, we can continue. Of course, if there are apprenticeship programs, as I said, secondary, post-secondary, we can get our Vermont youth to then, come into it. But, about the connectivity, I have to say this. In 2010, our Vermont congressional delegation, which is the same as it is now, made a press release, a big announcement that the USDA had given an $81 million grant and a $35 million loan to Springfield company called VTEL, and they call that a game changer, and that would get broadband to everybody. That was 2010.
Do you know the story behind VTEL? Okay.
Yes.
That's why we have a problem.
So now it's hard for us to get federal funding.
Right. So where did it go, right?
Right.
So then this is not a problem that our government can solve, right? Private companies have to come in and do it. But we still have candidates on the Democratic side, and I don't mean any personal offense, but I'm just saying that they're running on a platform of broadband. We need broadband. Well, we've tried that for 10 years. It's
But
not happening.
But they won't say the truth about VTEL. That's the problem. They won't go and say, hey, by the way, VTEL did 8% of what they said, and they're gone out of Vermont with the 120 million. Exactly. So you're right about that, and and they know that, but because we don't have connectivity now in certain parts of the state, that people are clamoring to whatever they're saying. Oh, we're going to get it. We got $21 million in the COVID CARES Act.
No.
It's what's that? What's $21 million? That's nothing.
No, I think it's important for a government to step out of the way, make room for private companies to come and solve this problem. Because you can fix it. As I said, we are a first world nation. We are a global superpower. We have abilities to fix this problem. There's no reason why Vermont, which is still a part of the United States, we're all Americans. Right. Why should we suffer? Why should we not have access to these 21st century?
Steph and I talk about that all the time. Yeah. We talk about that all the time.
So how would you attract like a major player to Southern Vermont?
So it has first you have to have somebody in office.
Right. Like
the lieutenant governor who says Vermont is open for business.
Right.
Right. That's the first thing, because we don't even hear that, so people aren't even considering Vermont. Right. And then this is not so. Our campaign is called Small Towns, Big Hearts, and the vision is prosperity. We want prosperity for all, especially middle class families. This requires a fundamental shift in the way Vermont is governed. One person isn't going to be able to change it. Absolutely not. And it's not going to happen overnight. But by me winning, let's say if I have the honor of doing that, it opens the door, and it says everybody else who also believes in these values and has these convictions and this frame of mind, let's get together, let's win. We have elections every 2 years. Let's do that, and let's change the way that Montpelier governs.
Right.
And then we can start addressing the bureaucracy, the regulations, and then we can make way for companies like Amazon and Tesla to come here.
Okay. Well, we have just a little over 1 minute left. Can you believe that already? So if people are interested in knowing more about you and what you stand for, how can they find that information?
So our website is Hansen, Hansen, for Vermont spelled out.com. And on Facebook, you can find me. As I said, we have a very active, growing community of over 2,500 followers. So just search my name, Hansen with an E-N. That would be that's the best place to connect and get regular updates.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming by. We appreciate it. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I'm really glad that you're running. And we got some new blood, just like all the newbies and
young people that are running
that are willing to run for office.
Thank you. This was great. Yes. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, it was very
all right,
informative.
Steph. We gotta go.
We do have to go.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to y'all next time.
We love you, Bennington.
I gotta tell you something. Come and see me, honey, I gotta tell you eye to eye. Oh, little darling, I really love you. Listen to me, honey, 'cause I'm speaking from the heart. Baby, please know I love you. Come on, girl, I really need you. Let me show you what I'm holding for. You make me a lucky guy.